Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Book Festival. My name is Carol Llewellyn and I am the former artistic director of the Penworld Voices Festival there in New York and currently the CEO of the Wheeler Centre for Books, Writing and Ideas in Melbourne, Australia. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that this evening's conversation is taking place on unceded sovereign lands. I'm joining you from Melbourne, as is Alexis, on the lands of the Kulin Nation and pay the greatest respect to elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to acknowledge the elders of First Nations communities and cultures in the United States and elsewhere. It's my great pleasure to welcome to the festival, to be at the festival and to welcome to the festival my two guests tonight. And Alexis Wright is a member of the Wanyee Nation of the Southern Highlands of the Gulf of Carpentaria. She's the author of the prize-winning novels Carpentaria, which was awarded the 2007 prestigious Miles Franklin Award, and The Swan Book. Alexis has published 3 works of non-fiction, Take Power, an oral history of the Central Land Council, Grog War, a study of alcohol abuse in the Northern Territory, and Tracker, the 2018 Stella Prize-winning collective memoir of Aboriginal leader Tracker Tillmouth. Her books have been published widely overseas, including in China, the US, the UK, Italy, France, and Poland. She is the Bouvier, I can never get that right. I'm sorry, Alexis, you're gonna have to pick up my pronunciation on all of these things, chair in Australian literature at the University of Melbourne, and is the only author to win both the Miles Franklin Award and the Stella Prize. My other guest, a novelist, post-colonial theorist, and social activist, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, currently holds the post of Distinguished Professor of English and Comparative Literature at the University of California, Irvine. In 1964, Ngugi's debut novel, Weep Not Child, was the first novel in English to be published by a writer from East Africa. Since then, he has gone on to write a body of work that includes several novels, plays, short stories, and essays. His books have been translated into 30 languages. He began writing in English, but following his arrest and imprisonment without charge at the Kamiti Maximum Security Prison in Kenya, after the performance of his critical play, I Will Marry When I Want, he made the decision to work in his mother tongue, Gikuyu. He wrote the novel Devil on the Cross on toilet paper during his time in prison. His other works include the childhood memoir Dreams in a Time of War and the sweeping satire Wizard of the Crow. He has been favored for the Nobel Prize for Literature many times, and one year was Ledberg's favorite against Cormac McCarthy and Haruki Murakami. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here with you both today at the Brooklyn Book Festival. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Cara. Yeah.
Thank you, Cara.
And it's good to see Alexa.
Well,
yeah.
Alexis and I are joining you from stage 4. I think we're in week 7 or 8 of stage 4 lockdown here in Melbourne, correct, Alexis?
I think we've been in lockdown all year, and but this is stage 4, and yeah, it's been for some time, and
yes,
2 months, and it continues and may continue even more. It's due to ease in about 2 weeks, but there's more spikes, and we don't know.
Not a whole lot of fun down here.
It's a global lockdown.
And
we're the same here in California, so we are kind of we are together.
Together, yeah.
Together.
Yeah, well, the whole world's together in this.
On other ends of the world in this remote way, but it's a wonderful thing. And I thought, actually, since we are all holed up in our homes, unable to travel, and both of your works are so deeply to do with place, I wondered whether you might be able to, we might begin today by each of you describing where it is you come from. I'd love you to take us on a quick journey to your homelands. And Alexis, maybe you can take us first to the Gulf of Carpentaria, and then perhaps Ngugi, you can take us to the highlands of Kenya.
Well, our family come from homelands, Wonyu country, which is in the lower highlands of the Gulf of Carpentaria. It's a very well, dry, hot country. There's great plains of grassland in the area, in our country. There's spring-fed river systems where there's clear water, running water all year, and it's lined by pandanus trees and palm fig trees. It's full of fish and turtles and water lilies. It's like paradise on earth around there. The rest of the country is very, very dry, and like I said, there's grasslands. There's gorge areas. There's spinifex country. There's also very arid land, savanna-like country with low-lying bushes and scrub and big gum trees around near the rivers. And but it's unusual to have that river system in this area, in this zone. It's an ancient land. The whole country is very ancient. So we say it's the oldest continent on Earth, and you can see that in that area where I'm describing is in that homeland is we call Rainbow Serpent Country, and the gorge area is Wujimala, and it's very sacred. It's a very sacred area. The waters are believed to have healing powers, and and we also have a lot of issues because, like you said before, it's unceded, sovereignty was never ceded in that area. It's pristine country. We have a lot of issues with development in the area. It's really is a pristine environment, and it's very fragile. And so we have concerns that we come up from time to time, and we take up issues with that, and also getting control back of our traditional lands has been a big issue for forever, since colonization. So, but we also are very strong people, and I try to write about these things in my work. And we believe that the ancestral beings like Rainbow Serpent created the country and are still there. They're still resting in different places in the country, and they're really sacred places. And and for and we believe if anything happens that's wrong and they leave the country, it will destroy everything. So, and there's a lot of those stories that are ancient stories, but they're also embedded in real things that happened in the ancient past.
We're going to come back to those issues in both of your work, those mythologies and stories and traditions. But perhaps, Ngugi, you can take us to your home in Kenya.
Oh, right now I was in Alex's own country, Carpentaria.
You'll take you there one day.
I was very, very envious, right? Yeah. Kenya. By the way, I was in Australia once, so I've got good memories of Australia, Melbourne, and Sydney. Yeah.
Sydney, yes, that's right.
In the waters around Sydney, and I went to some islands across Sydney. There are some islands which are very, very fascinating. When I was there, I liked it very much being there. Yeah. Kenya, and I've been away from more exiled from one country, although now I can go back, but I have been away from Kenya for the last so many years.
Mm.
So the memory I have of Kenya really is one when I visit occasionally, but of my childhood. But Kenya is really also a very beautiful country with varieties of climate zones. You know, for instance, we've got Mombasa, which is Malindi towns, which are very old cities. You know, that Milton, the English writer, talked about in his Paradise Lost and so on. Is yeah, so Malindi there, but that's at the sea coast. But from the sea coast, you go to where I come from, to the highlands. Okay, you know, and the highlands again, the climate change from cool sort of to fairly cold areas, you know, and then you go some other dry areas also of Kenya, you know, with plenty of lakes, I might say, right? Yeah, and yeah, so our land is really, well, I would say beautiful, because you use the word beautiful for the land, for people, for character. Yeah, character can be beautiful, place can be beautiful, land can be beautiful. Yeah, and our history, a bit like Australia in this sense that it's a settler colony. It used to be a settler colony. There were two types of colonies in Africa. Ones where Europeans did not settle, but they conquered in terms of administration and other resources, but there was no settlement. The other ones, we call them settler colonies, colonies like Algeria for the French, Kenya, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and to a certain extent Angola and Mozambique. You know, those are settler colonies, meaning there was white settlement. So in those settler colonies, they are unique in our politics because our politics always revolved around the issue of land, right? This was common to all settler colonies, the land issue. If you go to Nigeria, there was no land issue in Nigeria, or what I call protectorate type of colonies, which were not settled. Their politics was slightly different because they never revolved around the issue of land, like Nigeria, Ghana, Uganda. But Kenya, Zimbabwe, South Africa, the politics revolved around land, what they call Idaka. Yeah. And yeah,
that's very much the same for Indigenous people here in Australia. It's been an issue of land, and that idea of settle, you know, the settles, such a strange thing. Settle seems like such a soft word, and actually settlement has been such a terrible word for your people. But I want to talk to you about activism. We've both talked about the politics, a little bit about the politics of for your countries. But Ngugi, you were imprisoned, and in 1977, 14 years after Kenyan won independence, and in 1982, after trying to resurrect your theatre company, you were thwarted by police, and you spent the next decades in exile, both in the UK and the US. And Alexis, you have talked about the struggle you had trying to determine whether being a writer was a valid way to spend, I hope I'm getting this right, with a correct representation of what you said, was a valid way for you to spend your time when the stakes for your people were so high. And I wondered whether you had an obligation to be more on the front lines, and you wondered whether you had an obligation to be more on the front lines fighting for your people. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, it seems, it's just like Googie, that every day, every day, every moment of your life, and is spent fighting for things that you believe should happen, for and the wrongs that are happening for with in your world and with your people, and what you see it every day. There's not one day that goes by that that you're not able to not think about these things, and where people are struggling to live, struggling with all sorts of issues, basic, really basic issues, living, how people are living, and what is a first, what Australia's made a first world country out of Aboriginal misery, um, so they're concerns, and they're still here, and they're uh, it's black deaths in custody, a big issue. Uh, the issues on every front, and you saw that recently with Black Lives Matters. When we joined, what happened in America with the deaths there, and so it became a wide event, and it certainly happened in a big way here. And but we're because it reminds us of what happens here, and on a daily basis, and so the whole struggle of trying to preserve your rights to land, preserve, and to look after country. I mean, they're really big responsibilities in Aboriginal law, and uh, and if you can't do that, there's all sorts of ramifications and consequences in Aboriginal society, and so there are things that we live with every day. So, and we need every person, involved in the struggle, and that was the issue that I had with what I was doing. I was involved in a whole lot of those things, and I continue to be involved, and to stand up for things, and our rights, and to say what I say in my writing, and that's probably a good way, because I'm independent, and I'm not tied to anyone in any way, to not be able to be compromised in what I say.
Googie, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, one of the things, an aspect of that, which, well, of course, there's a difference, say, between, say, Kenya today and First Nations in Australia, in a sense that there's a difference which I can see. I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong. With Kenya and South Africa and Zimbabwe, at least the people of that country went through decolonization up to the independence, right? Meaning now African people themselves control the country. Now there are very few white settlers now, okay? But what we did after independence was Africanization of the pyramid of colonialism. In other words, you think of colonialism as a pyramid with a few white people at the top and Asians in the middle and Africa at the bottom. We retained that pyramid structure, but only removed the racial barriers to the movement up and down the pyramid, but the pyramid structure of our colonial society remained the same. That means no matter the color of the skin, only a few people can be at the top of the pyramid. The mass of the people at the base of the pyramid, okay? So that's what in a way, I've been struggling with or against, or what informs my writing. But another thing which I'm very concerned with is the question of language, because apart from the colonization of the land itself, there was a lot of battery at our languages, right? And although African languages were not completely abolished, but they were so battered and broken by the colonial system, that after independence, we tried to continue with a system where English was at the top of the hierarchy of languages, okay? So everything is English language in education, in administration, in everything. But the majority of people each have their own languages, what they call their mother tongue, okay? And I strongly believe in equality of languages, even if those languages are spoken by only 5 people, right? I believe, for me, there's no language which is more of a language than any other, But at the same time, languages can feed into each other, but not when they are put in a hierarchy, where English or French or Portuguese or Spanish is at the top of the hierarchy, and others are seen at somewhere at the bottom of the pyramid, or not existing, Mm-hmm. So I fight against a system where the whole notion that in order for me to be, you must cease to be. So in order for my language to be, say English, other languages must cease to be, right? And Kenya is in that kind of situation right now, where English is very dominant. Yeah.
And Alexis, a 2013 Australian Geographic article estimated that of the 250 languages spoken before colonization, only about 50 Aboriginal languages exist in use today. How is that for your people? How is language, the question of language, important for you?
Well, it's quite difficult. There's just been a new report on the state of Aboriginal languages in Australia, and I think it's even less than that number that you just quoted of languages that are fully spoken in their communities, and it's a really big issue. It's a struggle that every community has, every Aboriginal nation across the country. It's a struggle, very in that region, in our region. Wānyu language is only spoken by a handful of people who can speak it, fluently.
Yeah. But hello. Are you frozen?
Yes, I think we may have Alexis may have just frozen. Now she's back. Great.
Oh, yeah.
So we just froze for a sec there.
All right. So the language is being taught in schools, but where some of the schools where the communities, big large communities in our region. Like Dumuji and Mornington Island, there's other languages involved as well, because say Dumuji, people were sort of rounded up and put on those communities from other parts of the region where other languages were spoken. So there's a whole mixture of languages, and so it's how do you teach those in schools where there's 4 or 5 different languages, and we developed dictionaries, and so there's a whole lot of things happening. And so I ran a constitutional convention in the Northern Territory some years ago, and on stop the Northern Territory from becoming, the seventh state of Australia, and because they had a flawed constitution. So that there was over, there's nearly 2,000 people there, 1,500 to 2,000 people at this convention, right out in the middle of the bush. No conveniences. Had to do everything ourselves, and but that convention was run in about 8 languages. So anyone who spoke, everything had to be translated down the line in the 8 languages, and that was really confronting for the Australian politicians who came to that convention to talk, because they had to only speak just very short bursts, and then it had to be translated into 8 different languages, and they found it very confronting. But that's
fantastic.
I think that's good, at least, because the way I think of languages, is hearing. I think of languages myself as the way I can compare languages is with musical instruments, although language is more than that. You don't say each musical instrument has its own musicality, okay? Its own sound. They can play the same melody, but you can tell that's guitar, that's piano, that's violin, and we don't say the piano is more of a musical instrument than violin, okay? You don't say, let us abolish or minimize all the other instruments and just leave one, the guitar or the piano, okay? No, you do the other way around. Each has unique musicality, and when you bring them together in a certain way, you get orchestra and duets and other things, okay? So how languages relate, they can give oxygen to each other, right? But when they put on a hierarchy, either on or for whatever basis, then that's where the problem really begins. Now, I know Alex is interested very much in environment, because I was on her, I was listening to her YouTube lecture earlier, and I was very impressed with the way she talks about environment and our connection with nature, with environment, and so on, and how indigenous sort of literary systems are very much conscious, aware of, or what we call orature, very much aware of environment is part of that whole knowledge system, right? And so anyway, the key thing is languages are like musical instruments, arranged in a certain way. They give oxygen to each other. They can create an orchestra or duets or other things. In a hierarchy, they suffocate. The one that suffocates the others, right? And in the process, we lose so much knowledge system.
Yeah.
The knowledge system carried by that language, it's like losing the musicality of an instrument, right? Yeah. So we really need to rethink about languages, even if that language is spoken by only 5 people. It's a language in its own right, just like a musical instrument. You don't say the organ is so huge, it should be the only instrument.
That's right.
Yeah, you see, so, even if the small one, it's part of that musical system. Yeah.
Speaking of musicality, I want to talk about your books, because that's part of what we're a very big focus of why we're here today. And I'm hoping that people will go and buy your books during and after the session. So Alexis, let's concentrate on the Swan book, which is set in the future, and as Gugi says, is very preoccupied with the question of environmental degradation, desolation, catastrophe, really, and with Aboriginal people still living under the intervention in the north in an environment fundamentally altered by climate change. It follows the life of a mute young woman called Oblivia, which is my favorite character name of any book I think I've ever read. Oblivia is just such a great name. And when the Swan book was published in 2013, the Australian literary critic Geordie Williamson described the book as a curse poem, which he compared to Ibis, the poetry that Ovid composed in exile when he considered himself to be buried alive, and created poetry that reeked of sadness, isolation, pride, self-pity, and anger. He felt the novel, like Ibis, emerged from the experience of exile, in this case, the physical displacement and inward migration of Indigenous Australians since European arrival in 1788. Can you talk about that and that, about the book? The idea of exile?
Well,
Sorry, which book is it? Carpentaria?
No,
this is
Swan
Swan
book.
Huh?
The Swan book. The Swan book, Gucci.
That's the title. The Swan book. Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
the Swan book. For want of a better title.
Beautiful title.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's look, I was thinking when I was wanting to write this second novel, or third novel after Carpentaria. There was so much being said by scientists throughout the world about climate change, global warming, and not much happening by governments in taking action to prevent, world from warming up to the point it is today. And I was trying to look at a way of putting that science in the facts into a story that we could understand. And at the same time, there was the intervention in the Northern Territory from the government to take control of Aboriginal communities and take the control out of our hands. And so I was thinking about, where are we going to in the world, and where we're going as Aboriginal people if we keep on having negative type policies that, it was a backward step, kept taking a backward step, more loss of language, and so I was thinking if how to look at these two things, and I decided to write a book that was set in the future, 100 years from now, of what the world might look like, what this country might look like, what the world of Aboriginal people might look like, and with backwards sort of thinking happening all the way. What, if it was just continually wiping us out as people, what would the last Aboriginal person standing look like? What sort of person would that be? And so that's how the book came about. And then with this, obsession with swans, and looking at how the world could actually, relate to the environment, and to things, animals in the environment in a good way. And if you look through the ages, through long history of poetry, epic stories written about swans, you can see the beauty there. We could appreciate the beauty of swans, for instance. And why can't we do that with all these animals, that we're wiping out in the world because of, global warming and climate change, rising seas and disappearing islands and disappearing species. So it was the inward, and Geordie Williamson talked about the inward migration, and I thought about that. Well, it's, you can look at that in a lot of ways, and if you look at it from the perspective of an Indigenous person in this country, we live in the mind, and we live, we're exiles in ourselves, and we think You know, we think about country all the time. We're connected. Connect us to country and country to us. It's one and the same. And we're connected to all things. You know, every life form in the country, and you know, in a traditional sense. And so it's, you know, we're there with country all the time. It's happening, you know, in our thoughts, and we visit country, we talk to country, and
Yeah.
so that's it's a very important, you know, way, you know, for this dialogue that's happening between country and us as people all the time.
Great. Now, Googie, The Perfect Nine, which is your latest book, marks something of a departure from your earlier work. It's a novel in verse that reimagines the origin story of the Gikuyu people of Kenya. There it is. Great. I'm so glad you could show it.
Yeah.
Blending folklore, mythology, and allegory. Can you talk about this book and how this book came about, and just give a little synopsis of it?
Yeah, this is actually, Ari, like the First Nations, we have our own mythologies, like mythology of origins. First of all, Kenya has many peoples, okay, with the distinctive languages, African languages, okay? But each community has their own myth of origins, you know, who created the earth, you know, who gave them the land, you know. So our Gikuyu people, who are part of the Kenyan peoples, Gikuyu people, their myth of origins is that they come from one man called Gikuyu and one woman called Mombi. Mombi actually means creator. And Gikuyu and Mombi were put on top of Mount Kenya by, or what they call the mountain of ostrich whiteness, or the mountain of the moon. They were put on this mountain of the moon called Mount Kenya because, you know, it's got permanent snow all the year round. So the ancient Egyptians, when they saw it, they thought of it as the mountains of the moon, right? Anyway, they are placed there by God, and they are shown all the land below, you know, as a Gikuyu country, okay? You know, but Gikuyu and Mombi had on 9, 10 daughters, okay? They had no brothers, right? And so when it came to time for marriage, anyway, they they went back to the mountain, and God provided the following morning 9 handsome or 10 handsome young men were there at the door, okay? So my story, The Perfect Nine, is about those 9, 10 daughters, right? I asked myself, if they were the only daughters, then it meant, and they had no brothers, then it meant they had to do everything, right? They had to know how to build, how to hunt, how to defend themselves, how to make weapons, you know, create. They had to use their mind, their hands, you know, and their hearts together, you know, sort of, right? Yeah. So that's my interpretation of that myth, where I visualize about suitors hearing of their beauty come from all over the continent and descend around Mount Kenya for the hand of one of the beautiful ones.
And they have to go through quite an ordeal to get to them, don't they?
They are sent on an ordeal back to the mountain. And that's where they meet also hazards which will try their character, and which is more the girls accompany them. So whatever hazard they go through, the girls also go through the same hazards, right? Yeah. So that's really the gist of the the main part of the epic is when the journey of the 9 suitors with the 9 girls go to the mountain. By the time they come back, they are really only about 9, 10 suitors are left. The others have fallen on the wayside.
Fled,
Or
fled, perished. One of them.
or given up or whatever. Yeah.
That's right. Gone home. Alexis, now Oblivia is also a very, I love this connection between the two of you, these very strong female characters. Oblivia is also, she's mute, but she's her resilience. She's an incredibly resilient soul. Now, I'm also very aware that we're running out of time, and I really wanted you to read something, but we've only got 5 more minutes left, so maybe we'll just keep talking and we'll let people read the books themselves. Or would you like to read for a couple short minutes each?
Let me see whether there's something I can read very quick.
What do you think, Alexis? Would you like to do a short reading? I think it'll have to be quite short because we've only got about 4 minutes left. So maybe we'll end on the readings.
All right.
Okay. Whoever's first is ready to go can go. First wins.
Okay, let's start, because I'll just tell the story of when the Koyo and Mombi and his wife Mombi, they are brought to the mountain top. They journey from elsewhere. I see them as coming from elsewhere through many hazards themselves. So they too have to go through many things before they come to the top of the mountain, okay? But when they are on the top of the mountain, they are overwhelmed by the land before them. And they sing and they broke into hymn of praise. And they talk to God, owner of ostrich whiteness, we praise you for this brightness that shines so. This soil, these rivers, and these numerous hills, and animals of varied shapes and color. These flowers reflect your glory. The plants and the animals and the birds and the creatures that dwell in rivers and lakes, all creation reflects your glory. It was you. We listened and heard the voice. It was your voice telling us that you have trusted us with the beauty to tend it with care and love, because this wonder manifests your glory. That's the
wonderful.
So they're
Thank you.
When they see all
Perfect.
the rivers and birds and animals, this nature as a whole, the interconnected nature as a whole, this is what is they are praising in that song, hymn.
Beautiful. Alexis, we've got a short reading from you, and then we've got another like 2 minutes, so we're really going to have to finish on these. I'm so sorry, it's gone so fast.
All right. It's wonderful being with you, Gugi. And I read your Perfect Nine. It's a wonderful novel, and I'm reading your Wizard of Crow at the moment.
Oh,
and,
thank you.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so I'm reading from the Swan book, and talking about what is happening to the land. Could an ancient hand be responsible for this? The parched paper country, looking as though the continent's weather system has been rolled into an ancient scroll from its top to bottom ends, and ping, sprung shut over the Tropic of Capricorn. The weather then flipped sides, swapping southern weather with that of the north. And this unique event of unrolling the climate upside down left the entire continent covered in dust. When the weather systems began leveling out after some years, both ends of the country looked as though normal weather was being generated from the previously dry centre of Australia. With the heart of the country locked into a tempestuous affair, hot and sticky, what was once the South's cool temperate climate, mixed with the North's tropical humidity until the whole country was shrouded in days of dust, junda, or all The Time in Heavy Cyclonic Rain. And I'll finish there. I think that's probably it.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yes, it's been such a pleasure. It's gone so fast. I've got so much to talk to you both about. Thank you for being at the Brooklyn Book Festival. It's been a joy to talk to you. I hope everybody will go and buy the books. They're really extraordinary. It's what a pleasure and an honor. Thank you both so much.
Let me just tell them the title once more, okay? Right?
That's it.
Perfect Nine.
All right.
This one book.
Yes.
That's
one
All
more.
right.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.